Hi, welcome to Chapter 9 of the Parenting Connection. I'm Pam.
And I'm Jim.
And if you remember last time in Chapter 8, we talked about power and how power impacts relationships and how encouragement or discouragement can really have a lot of influence on how our children feel and how they feel about being successful. And so today, we're going to focus on communication because we have a lot of power in the way that we use our words and also in the way that we listen. Why does communication even matter? A lot of us grew up in families where this type of thing wasn't even thought about or talked about. And kids' opinions and voices may not seem to have mattered much. But what we've learned is that the way that we talk to our children and our ability to listen to them will make a big difference in our relationship. And so I want to introduce you to a book. And the book is called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. Because I think that one of the things as parents that we find to be really important is that when our children listen to us and are more cooperative, we enjoy them more. But also, when our kids feel free to come to us with problems or when they come to tell us things that are going on in their lives, we really value that too. And so there are techniques that you can actually learn, and we're going to talk about them today. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about a client that we had in one of our parenting classes. Now, again, this book, it's called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And it's written by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish. And we present this book in class, and some of you have already received this book from us. And there was this particular woman in our class, and when she came to class, she had been in an altercation, a physical fight with her teenage daughter. And as a result of that, she had been arrested. And her daughter had been very empowered and felt like she could do whatever she wanted because her mom had gotten in trouble, even though they both ended up with concussions as a result of this physical fight that they had gotten into. And when the mother first came into our program, she was very angry and she didn't want her daughter to be in her house at all anymore. She wanted her to leave permanently. But for some reason, she really became very interested in reading this book. And she told me that she took it with her everywhere. She'd take it to the mall, wherever she was, she would be reading this book. And she started practicing some of the techniques in this book. And as a result of that, her daughter said to her, "Mom, why are you acting so strangely?" But she didn't stop. She kept going with these new skills that she was practicing. And soon, her daughter was coming home from school and starting to tell her things about her day, about her friends, about the boy that she was interested in. And the relationship began to improve. And this is pretty unusual because a lot of times these things take time and weeks or maybe months have to go by before things really start to change. But in this case, only 8 weeks after she started working with us, she had healed her relationship with her daughter and they were getting along really well. And part of me wondered, well, is this going to sustain itself over time? About a year later, a woman came into our program and she was talking about her friend who happened to be the mother who had read the book. And I said, "Oh, how's she doing?" And she said, "She's doing great." And I said, "How's her relationship with her daughter?" And she said, "Oh, it's wonderful. They get along great." And that was a year later. And this was a kid who had gone from, I think, being age 16 to 17. So even though it might seem a little strange or artificial to start to think about the way that you relate to your kids differently, it can be really worth the investment, especially if you're not really excited about the way that your relationship was with your own parents growing up. So there's two parts to communication. One part is speaking, and one part is listening. And the way you speak will have a lot to do with how your child reacts to you. There's typical ways that parents often speak to children, and they mean well, and they don't really think twice about it, but it doesn't necessarily have the effect that they would want. And it doesn't make their kids more cooperative, or it doesn't make their kids feel closer to them. Also, there's specific ways of listening to your children, and to other adults for that matter, that make them feel really seen and heard. And when a person feels seen and heard, they also feel closer to you. And so we're going to we're going to start by talking a little bit about how to speak to your children.
And on the topic of speaking to your children, as you're saying, some of the things that we do as parents are helpful and they foster communication, and then other things not so much. They tend to shut down communication. Let's look at how it goes wrong. Some of the things that parents do, and they probably don't realize they're doing them, but some of the ways that they block communication with their children. And we have some examples here.
Okay, let's do a few.
Let's do a few, yeah. The first one is blame, which probably will sound familiar. And in each of these examples, one of us will be the child and one person will be the parent, and it'll be obvious, I think, who's who. So the first example of blame. Mom, can I play a little longer?
No, because you always make us late for church.
So now let's try that again, and this time let's try to see how a parent might respond differently in a more open manner. Mom, can I play a little longer?
You wish you could play longer. But I'm sorry, we have to get ready for church. So I was acknowledging what he was wishing or what his feeling was without blaming him or thinking ahead about how things could go wrong.
Great. All right, the next one is called command.
Say, Dad, if I get a ride home with Lucretia after the game, I will still have time to do my homework and make cookies.
You're coming home with us after the game, and I don't want to hear another word about it.
So as a child right there, I felt completely unheard and completely unvalued.
And as a parent, I got to totally exercise my power and authority, and I didn't have to think about it at all. I didn't have to stop and talk to you. I just basically said a big no.
Let's try it again.
Let's try it again, yeah.
Say, Dad, if I get a ride home with Lucretia after the game, I will still have time to do my homework and make cookies.
Lucretia. Yeah, that might be okay. If you get a ride home and you think you'll still have time to get your homework done, that's important.
And then maybe I'll still have time to make cookies.
Okay, well, all right, as long as I get to have some, I guess.
That's a much friendlier response. And if the father really feels like that's not going to work out time-wise because it's already too late, he might, after she comes home with her friend and does her homework, say, I know you were hoping to make cookies, but it's gotten a little bit late. And so maybe we'll save that for tomorrow, without shaming her or blaming her or saying, well, if you hadn't gotten a ride home with your friend, you would have had time to make cookies. But just sort of letting them live the consequences of their own decisions.
And I decided to be flexible. I still could have said no as the parent, and I may have had good reasons. Right. But I decided to think about it and, go with what she
suggested. Let her have that decision-making power, and if it ends up being too late to make cookies, well, that's just the way it goes.
Chances are, if she's old enough to make cookies and go to the game, she's probably old enough to start having an opinion about and making requests.
And learning about what's realistic.
Yeah.
She's not going to learn if she's not given a chance to try things out.
Right. So the next one is advise. Oh, my friend Malcolm got sent to the principal's office today.
why don't you find another friend? Seriously, you don't need to hang out with kids who get into trouble.
See, now if that was me, I'm sharing about my friend and something that happened to them. And then when you tell me, really, you should have different friends, now I feel bad for Malcolm and I feel bad for myself because I think, oh, I guess I shouldn't talk to Malcolm anymore. Like I'm going to lose a friend. And that doesn't feel very good.
Right, and I'm not really putting myself in my son's place at all because I'm just worried about my son and having him turn out the way I think he ought to turn out rather than helping him, process what happened to his friend and maybe understand why that might have happened or I don't even know anything about it. It might have been completely unfair.
So let's try it again.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, my friend Malcolm got sent to the principal's office today.
That must have been scary.
I know, I was scared for him because I didn't know what happened and I couldn't talk to him.
You were worried.
I was. I can't wait to hear if he's okay.
Yeah. So tomorrow maybe you'll be able to find out a little bit more about it.
Wow, I hope so.
How does that feel?
I now feel okay that I'm concerned about my friend, right? He's my friend. And I'm curious what happened, but really I just want to know he's okay. And, the fact that you didn't come down on me made me feel like, hey, it's okay to be concerned about someone else.
That's right. And it leaves the door open for a further conversation about learning about what did happen to Malcolm.
Right.
I mean, maybe Malcolm got in trouble completely unfairly and got blamed for something, or maybe he did something that was really dangerous, and then we get to talk about that.
Yeah.
So I think the goal here is to keep the communication open so we can see what our kids are experiencing, and there's opportunities then for them to learn about consequences in life.
Yeah. So the next one is calling names. That should be a familiar one, right?
Sorry, I forgot to take the trash out last night.
Well, that's not going to cut it when you get older. You're hopeless.
So now I feel completely defeated. Like, I'm never going to be able to do anything right. I can't even remember to take the trash out. I might as well just give up.
Yeah, like a total vote of no confidence.
Yeah, I can't even do the simple stuff. Don't
No.
expect anything from me.
Right.
Sorry, I forgot to take the trash out last night.
Yeah, I did notice you forgot to take the trash out. It happens to all of us. So, okay. So you can do it as soon as you get a chance.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay,
Dad.
Sure.
So that time, I felt really grateful for being allowed to make a mistake because I felt like there was an acknowledgement that everyone does make mistakes. And so that gives you room to try harder the next time instead of just to feel like you're a failure.
It's not this mark on your character
Right.
that
It's
you
not
have to
who
try
I am
and
as a person.
live down.
Which really starts to wear.
Yeah. So the next one is discounting. Wow, I feel nervous about asking her to the dance.
Don't be nervous. You'll never even remember this dance when you grow up.
That just sort of took my feeling and just kind of like pushed it away, swept it under the rug. Or like maybe there's something wrong with me that I would feel nervous or afraid. Like that's not okay to feel that way.
Yeah, and discounting really, it tries to erase a feeling. But the feeling doesn't go away. It just sort of becomes more confusing.
Yeah. Like maybe I would start to feel, like, I shouldn't feel that way, or maybe like ashamed or confused about well, why do I feel nervous? It's not important. So I guess it's not important that I feel.
Right. There's no room for me to have feelings.
Yeah, that's not important.
And then those feelings come out sideways or get expressed on someone else, maybe in anger or in frustration, because I never really get to express what I'm actually feeling.
Yeah. So let's try that again. I feel nervous about asking her to the dance.
Yeah, you're not sure what she's going to say.
I know. What if she says no?
That could hurt your feelings.
Yeah, I'm nervous.
I think everybody who's going to ask someone to do something always has that little feeling of, what if they reject me?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it could be anything, asking people to get a piece of pizza or, even simple things like that.
Yeah, I mean, friends are important to us.
Sure. Sure.
So that time, it really feels much more, again, normal. It's normal to be anxious or worried when you're sticking your neck out and becoming vulnerable in front of another person.
That's right, and those feelings are going to be challenging enough on their own without adding another layer of don't feel that way, there's something wrong with you, that just makes it harder.
Exactly.
So let's just stop for a minute and talk about these blocks. And like we said, or like you said, parents have good intentions. We want to help our kids, and we think that by, I'll even go so far as to say, giving them a little bit of a lecture, we think we're going to tell them how it is and get them ready for life. But, if we would stop and reflect on it maybe a little bit, we're not stopping to be with how the child feels. We're skipping right over it. And we're either telling them, essentially, don't feel that way, or essentially, don't bother me with your problems. I'm not interested in how you feel. The child comes to us, they're vulnerable when they tell us these things. And then when we step in, trying to fix their problem or whatever, we end up feeling a bit powerful, like we've got all the answers. But that doesn't really help our child and how they're feeling. And if we try and put ourselves in their shoes, when we have a problem that we want to talk about, we don't want to hear other people telling us what to do.
That's right. And remember about the brain, when you're feeling calm and relaxed, as children often are when they come to their parent, or maybe they're even a little upset, and then it goes up into the emotional part of your brain. And if you can help your child feel safe and calm, that allows them to start problem solving and making good decisions. Whereas if when they come to you, you hurt their feelings or shut them down or frustrate them, then they sort of go into that dysregulated state where they just want to either attack you back or get away from you, and it makes the relationship go further apart. And then it makes it hard for them to move forward and think through their problems and think about how to make decisions. They're young and they're just learning. Their brain, remember, is not functioning at the same level as an adult. And so these are all new situations for them, and they're trying to find their way.
Yeah, like we've said before in other episodes, kids are not good at identifying their feelings and being with them and processing them, right, and talking about them. So we as the parents need to be the ones who help them through that a little bit. And if all we do when they bring us a feeling is shut it down, they're not going to learn how to identify them, deal with them constructively. None of that will happen.
How to set boundaries, how to take risks, all those things are so important. But kids are not all the same.
Well, right, and the reaction they have to us, it depends a lot on our tone of voice and the words that we choose, but also their own temperament. So different kids are going to respond differently to parents, right? So we talked before about the different temperaments, and they have funny names like choleric, melancholic, phlegmatic, and sanguine. Mm-hmm. And if you remember from when we talked about that, the choleric child is the fiery one. And probably no surprise, if we start lecturing to our choleric child, they'll probably get excited and want to argue back and want to fight with us.
They might become what people term as smart mouth.
Yeah.
And they're going to come back and they're going to attack you, or they're going to have some other way of looking at it.
They'll be probably smart mouth, maybe in your presence, or maybe once they leave, they may do, destroy things. Let's face it, kick the dog. These things happen. They
pick
do
on
these
a younger
things.
sibling.
That's right. They have to take out that aggression on someone or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you have a melancholic child, and they're the ones who are more sensitive, obviously, probably no surprise, they might break down. They might start to cry, or another common thing is they just get quiet and they stop sharing. Mm-hmm. So they may just go off on their own, looking sullen, and, who knows how they're going to process that.
Right, they may start to go more inward and get depressed or
Yeah.
feel sort of hopeless about life, and they're not
Right.
going to want to try new things or take chances.
Right. And the phlegmatic child is similar. They're a little more on the quiet side, probably, like the melancholic. And, who knows? I mean, they may take it to heart and get very hurt. They may be a little more easygoing about it and not know quite what to think of the parent's response.
They may hold a grudge and always remember.
Yeah.
Remember the time when I said this and then my parents said that back to me, and it may
Yeah.
get into a circle of revenge, but with the phlegmatic child, it's more subtle.
Yeah. They're probably not going to come out and make a big fuss about it, but
They might resist what you say or rebel in a
Yeah.
more quiet way.
yeah, right. And then lastly, the sanguine child, they seem more upbeat and energetic and easygoing and happy. So, they're more talkative though too. So they might try to make their case, and it may sound a little bit like arguing, but they probably won't be quite as fiery as the choleric kid. Maybe they'll go and, like you said, do something a little more passive aggressively, like not openly in front of you, but around the side. They're going to try to find a way to, get back.
Or when they have something that they want to say, they're never going to say it to you. They're going to find someone
They'll
else
go
to
to
say
someone
it.
else to talk
Maybe it'll
to.
be someone who's friendlier to them, a friend maybe, or
Someone will
another adult.
agree with them, right?
And so
Right.
in that case, every time that you're lessening that strength of that relationship, you're actually losing power, because your child isn't going to come to you and present to you their honest self so that you can
That's right.
have some influence over.
Because they're not going to trust that you're going to be okay and that you're going to listen. What you're teaching them is that you're going to shut down their feelings, and so they'll learn other ways to try and handle these things.
That's right. And you'll become less and less relevant to them.
Yes, right.
So parents don't really want this type of thing to happen in a relationship, do they?
I don't think they do. I think as parents, we're torn sometimes. We want to have power. We want to be the authority. We want our kids to respect us. But the funny thing is, if we don't do the things like listening, learning to be with their feelings without fixing them, the relationship isn't going to be there. And when the relationship isn't there, we're not much of an influence with our kids.
Yeah, and I think our society sort of teaches us, you've heard children should be seen and not heard. And I think that society has taught us that children don't deserve to be heard. But I think throughout history there's always been people who've known better than that. There's always been parents who instinctively knew that they needed to be generous, they needed to be kind, they needed to be available to their children. And I think that their children have then felt more empowered to go out into the world and really to maybe try to pursue their dreams. And I think that's what parents really want their children to express their gifts, to learn how to be their best selves. And sometimes when parents haven't had that type of encouragement themselves, it makes it hard for them to know how to do that with their kids.
So maybe this is a good time to talk about what are some of the objections that parents might have to, not blaming, not lecturing, not doing some of these communication blocks. Like what might parents be afraid of here?
They might be afraid that their child is going to get too much power. If I'm flexible and say, oh, well, you can come home with your friend, and then, you're going to want to come home and you're still going to want to make your cookies and do your homework, and the next thing it's
now
midnight.
all of a sudden the child is in charge.
Right.
The parent is afraid.
Right. So
Right.
that's one thing, that the parent's afraid that there's going to be some negative consequences for their child.
Okay.
What else do you think kids or parents might be worried about?
Well, we keep getting at this whole topic of feelings, and it seems like we're harping on it a lot, but I think we're trying to make a case for it. So we are putting some energy into defending feelings because we think they're important. They're not the only thing, of course, but they have a really important role. And if we as parents are not used to, dealing with our feelings, and they come up all the time, don't they? In our relationships, or let's say we're at work and those relationships, things happen all the time that make us angry, that make us sad. And if we aren't good at sort of dealing with those things at work, and we're not used to dealing with them at home, we're not going to want to be with our kids' feelings either. And so pretty soon there's this sort of don't go there kind of attitude about feelings.
That's right. And the relationships aren't making us feel good. And so where do we turn to feel good? Well, we turn to, eating, shopping,
Yes.
Watching
the game,
drinking, taking substances to help us feel better or feel differently. And oftentimes, we talked about the things that give us pleasure. There's nothing wrong with having pleasure, but I think that there's a deeper pleasure that comes from having really strong, trusting relationships that you can't get through just, sort of putting yourself aside and finding some outlet just to feel good.
Right, and all those things that we do to make ourselves feel good, right? I mean, in a way they are important, and we all have those things. We all have our hobbies and things that we like, and we're not judging any of that. But you're right. I mean, if we're not good at dealing with our life and talking about our feelings, we're probably going to rely on those things a lot, and we're going to avoid intimacy in relationships because that's where it gets real. That's where the feelings are. And the funny thing is, for the parents who say that feelings aren't important and, I don't want to listen to my kid complaining, those parents are also showing oftentimes a lot of anger and a lot of sadness, and it may look like depression. So they themselves are experiencing feelings. It's not like they've solved the problem or gotten away from it, right? It's still just as real for them.
Yeah, and I think that they'll find that there's a lot to be gained. When you have a child, you have a new opportunity to have a new kind of relationship that you may not have been able to have in your own family because your parents weren't open to that. Yeah. But when you develop that with your own children, it can be a source of an enormous joy.
Right.
So sometimes it might feel a little bit awkward to try some of these new skills or even to figure out when's a good time to introduce something. So I have a little story to tell you. When my daughter was little, I was actually going for some therapy myself. And my daughter had a problem with a neighbor child who was being mean to her. And I wasn't quite sure how to handle it because I got so angry myself at this other child in the neighborhood. And so I talked with the therapist about it, and she said, well, one thing you could do is role play with her. So when you know that there's going to be an interaction between them, you could practice ways for her to respond. And at first I thought, that seems sort of cheesy and silly and fake. But I respected this woman, and so I thought, it doesn't hurt to try it. And so I did. I practiced with my daughter, and it was really helpful. And so what Jim and I have been thinking about is one way that you can sit down with your kids and sort of just have free-flowing conversation is to have an art night. And that would be like one night a week or one night a month or however often you would like to do it, just to get out a bunch of art supplies and to sit down and to make things with your kids. And one thing that we thought would be fun to make is little puppets.
Yeah, and you really can use whatever materials you have on hand. They don't have to be fancy. I'm making little puppets, if you want to call them that, out of popsicle sticks and little cutout pieces of paper. I'm going to glue this on here. Most people have socks at home.
You can make a sock puppet?
Make a sock puppet.
Or you can make these really fancy. You can make all the members of the family. Even small children can participate in this by just gluing a piece of paper onto a popsicle stick.
Oh, yeah.
Kids have great imaginations, and so you can just pretend. And one of the things you can do is act out some scenarios. Maybe you can say, I'm going to be the kid and you be the parent. And then you can listen to how they talk, and you'll get an idea of how they hear you and how you sound to them, which might be, you might not like it or you might find it funny, but it's a good way to sort of learn a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, and if you're concerned about it getting out of hand, you might tell them ahead of time, like, okay, we're going to try something here. let's remember to be respectful. I mean, you could be honest, right, about how you think I sound as the parent, but let's make sure we try to keep it respectful.
So we have 2 more communication blocks that we're going to practice with our little puppets.
Yeah, it might be hard to see, but I'll be the parent in the first one.
Okay. I found a dog wandering around the neighborhood, and look, he followed me home.
Well, you know, dogs love strong smells, and it's probably because you didn't take a shower today.
So there's sarcasm, and that can really sting.
Yeah.
And sting deeply. And so
we think we're being funny as the parent when we say these things, but
depending again on the temperament of the child, you know, if you have a sanguine child, they might ha 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 and then come back at you with an equally sharp sarcastic remark. And so, you know, where there is room for humor, you have to be a little bit careful sometimes.
that's right. And often parents will not like their child being sarcastic with them. Like, you think it's okay for you to do it, but as soon as your kids imitate you, which kids will do,
That's right.
then all of a sudden, wait, we got a big problem.
That's not so funny.
But that's very confusing for kids because they think you could do it to them and that's fine.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Another communication block that parents often use, and which is really unhelpful to the relationships among siblings, is comparisons.
Yeah. So I got 2 A's and the rest were all B's on my report this marking period. Isn't that good?
Really? Your sister got all A's. Why didn't you? How did that feel?
Yeah, it feels like no matter what I do, it'll never be good enough.
That's right.
Yeah.
And maybe you're an excellent, well, you are an excellent artist, or maybe you're really good at, you know.
What if that was the only A I got? It was an art class, or not even an A, right? You know, it's like nothing would be good enough, and so.
That's right. So it's really important to value our kids as they are and not how we think society judges them. Because we all know, I mean, even the people who are highly successful often didn't do so great in school or didn't, you know, as a child, like that isn't what was coming out of them. It's something that develops as they go through their lives.
Yeah.
So I think we had a little bit of fun with our little puppets, and I think this is something that you might want to try with your kids.
It's fun to switch those roles. And you might be surprised how kids, you know, react and what they say. And it may give you a little perspective on yourself, too.
And kids can be very perceptive. This was a lot of fun today. Next time we're going to talk even more about listening, and we're going to look at the different parts of listening and think about how we can become really helpful listeners for our kids. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming.